He threw her away because his family called her unfit to carry his name. Now, at his wedding to the perfect bride, the doors swing open to reveal the truth he was never supposed to find. His ex-wife is standing there with twin sons, the true heirs to his throne. She raised them in the shadows while he chased a worthy legacy, and now the man who rules the underworld is realizing he's been a king of nothing. Hello everyone. Welcome back to another emotional Afro-Korean journey that explores what happens when power meets the one thing it can't buy, the truth. Before we get into this story of betrayal and redemption, help us hit our goal of 2,000 subscribers so we can keep bringing these stories to life. Let's dive in. Clear's throat. The silk of his tuxedo felt like armor. Jisoo Han stood at the altar of the Seoul Cathedral, the air heavy with the scent of 5,000 white lilies and the hushed whispers of the city's elite. Beside him, Minji Lee was a vision in sparkling lace, cold, composed, and exactly what his father had demanded. She was worthy. She was correct. The priest began the rites, and for a moment, Jisoo believed the hollow ache in his chest was just the price of power. But then, the heavy oak doors groaned open. The sunlight from the courtyard flooded the aisle, framing a woman who didn't belong in this world of muted grays and porcelain. Zara. She was draped in a blue dress that looked like a challenge, her gaze steady and unforgiving. But it wasn't just her. She held the hands of two boys in matching white shirts. As they stepped into the light, Jisoo's wine-glass-steady composure fractured. There, on the side of each boy's neck, was the crescent-shaped mark, the Han family seal. His blood, his son's, his real legacy was standing in the aisle, and he had just spent 3 years trying to replace them. The silence in the cathedral was absolute, a vacuum that swallowed the gasps of the city's most powerful families. Jisoo felt Minji's hand tighten on his arm, her manicured nails digging into the expensive silk of his sleeve, but she felt like a ghost beside him. His entire universe had narrowed to the woman in royal blue standing at the end of the aisle. He moved before his brain could offer a protest. His boots clicked against the marble floor, a rhythmic, sharp sound that echoed like a countdown. Behind him, he heard the sharp intake of his father's breath and the rustle of the Han elders shifting in their front-row pews, their faces contorted in a mixture of confusion and growing rage. But Jisoo was gone, pulled toward the aisle by an invisible, gravitational force. As he approached, the two boys didn't shrink away. They stood with a precocious dignity, clutching Zara's hands. They were a perfect fusion of him and the woman he had discarded. His own stubborn jawline and sharp brow, softened by Zara's warmth and deep, soulful eyes. Jisoo stopped inches from them, the scent of the lilies replaced by the faint, clean scent of soap and childhood. His hand, usually steady enough to hold a weapon without a tremor, shook as he reached out. Zara didn't move. She didn't flinch. She simply watched him with the cold, detached pity of someone watching a man realize he's already drowned. Gently, Jisoo used his thumb to nudge the collar of the taller boy's white shirt. His heart stopped. There, at the base of Kyung's neck, was a deep, wine-colored crescent moon. He turned his gaze to the second boy, Suk, and saw its twin, the mark of the firstborn. For generations, the Han family had mythologized this birthmark, claiming it only appeared on the skin of those destined to lead. The elders had used its absence during his marriage to Zara as proof that she was an unworthy vessel, a curse upon their lineage. They had lied. Or perhaps, the heavens had simply waited until the boys were safe from the coldness of the Han palace to reveal them. A sudden, violent wave of emotion crashed over him, not the cold calculation of a boss, but the raw, terrifying agony of a father. For 3 years, he had been a hollow man, a machine executing the will of his ancestors. He had walked through a gray world, convinced that worth was measured in blood purity and stock options. "They have the mark," Jisoo whispered, his voice sounding foreign to his own ears. It wasn't the voice of a crime lord. It was the sound of a man waking up in the wreckage of his own life. He looked up at Zara, his eyes searching hers for a shred of the woman who used to love him. "Zara, why didn't you tell me?" Zara's expression didn't soften. She looked at the altar, then back at his trembling hands. I didn't come here to tell you anything, Jisoo, she said, her voice a calm blade that sliced through the last of his composure. I came to show you that the legacy you were so worried about protecting is currently standing in a church that doesn't want them, watching their father marry a stranger. The silence that had gripped the cathedral didn't just break. It shattered under the weight of 1,000 judgmental eyes. Minji Lee stood alone at the altar, a porcelain doll abandoned in a shrine of white lace and expensive promises. For a moment, her face remained a mask of perfect, icy composure, the result of a lifetime of grooming for this exact role. But as Jisoo whispered those words, "They have the mark," the mask didn't just slip. It fractured, revealing the predatory coldness beneath. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Instead, she descended the altar steps with the slow, deliberate grace of a queen walking toward a guillotine, her heavy silk train hissing against the marble like a serpent. The guests, the elite of the underworld and the titans of industry, parted for her. When she reached the space where Jisoo stood trembling before his past, the air temperature seemed to drop. "A beautiful performance, Jisoo," Minji said, her voice a low, melodic chime that carried to the back of the room. She didn't look at the boys. She looked at Jisoo, her eyes scanning his face with a clinical, detached cruelty. "But you've forgotten where you are. And you've certainly forgotten who I am." She finally turned her gaze to Zara. The contrast was a visual war. Minji in her shimmering, virginal white, a symbol of the purity the Han family demanded, and Zara in her royal blue, a vibrant, living testament to everything they had tried to erase. Minji's lip curled in a microscopic sneer. To her, Zara wasn't a person. She was a glitch in a billion-dollar merger. "You must be the mistake the elders spoke of," Minji murmured, her eyes flicking down to Kyung and Suk. "The one who thinks a birthmark and a few years of silence entitles her to a seat at a table she was never invited to." Zara didn't flinch. She tightened her hold on her son's hands, her chin lifting. "I don't want your table, Minji. I came to show him the price of his seat. He paid for it with his own flesh and blood." Minji stepped closer, so close that the scent of her cloying, expensive perfume overwhelmed the lilies. She leaned in toward Zara, her voice dropping to a whisper intended only for the four of them. "You think you've won because you've caused a scene? You haven't seen a scene yet. My family didn't invest in this union for it to be derailed by a charity case and 2 accidents. They aren't accidents," Jisoo snapped, his voice returning with a sharp, protective edge that made the Han elders in the front row murmur in disapproval. "They are my sons." Minji finally looked at him, and for the first time, the fury was visible, a flash of pure, unadulterated hatred in her dark eyes. "They are a liability, Jisoo. In our world, an illegitimate heir isn't a miracle, he's a target. By bringing them here, she hasn't given you a legacy. She's given me a way to hurt you." She turned back to the pews, addressing the room with a voice of iron. "The Lee family does not accept insults, and we do not share power with ghosts." She looked back at Zara, a thin, bloodless smile touching her lips. "Enjoy your moment in the sun, Zara Williams. It's a long flight back to wherever you crawled out of. It would be a shame if something happened to those boys before they even learned how to use their names." The threat was as clear as the diamonds on her neck. Minji turned on her heel, her white dress billowing behind her like a shroud. She didn't head for the vestry. She headed for the main doors, signaling to her own security detail with a sharp flick of her wrist. She wasn't leaving in shame. She was leaving to begin a war. As she passed the Han elders, she paused only long enough to look Jisoo's father in the eye. "Fix this," she commanded, the words a death sentence. "Or I will. And when I'm done, there won't be enough of the Han bloodline left to mark a neck." The doors slammed shut behind her, the heavy thud echoing through the cathedral like the first shot of a revolution. Jisoo stood in the center of the chaos, his hands finally finding the shoulders of his sons, realizing that by claiming the truth, he had just painted a target on the only things in the world that actually mattered. The heavy oak doors of the vestry clicked shut, sealing out the frantic murmurs of the wedding guests and the distant, rhythmic strobe of paparazzi flashes. For the first time in 3 years, Jisoo was in a room alone with the woman he had tried to erase from his soul. The air was thick with the scent of old incense and the raw, electric charge of a million unasked questions. Jisoo reached out, his hand hovering near Kyung's head, but the boy leaned back into the safety of Zara's dress. The rejection stung worse than any betrayal by his lieutenants. "Don't," Zara said, her voice a low, steady vibration. She wasn't the trembling woman who had signed the divorce papers on a rainy Tuesday in Seoul. She stood like a fortress, her presence filling the small stone room. "They don't know you, Jisoo. To them, you're just a man in a tuxedo who looks like the monster in their bedtime stories." "I am their father, Zara," Jisoo rasped, the word father tasting like ash and iron. 3 years. You let me believe I had no one. You let the elders convince me that our union was a failure of the blood." Zara let out a sharp, humorless laugh that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "A failure? I spent my first trimester in a studio apartment in Detroit, working 12-hour shifts because this severance your family's lawyers gave me barely covered the flight home. I didn't hide them to hurt you, Jisoo. I hid them because I saw what your world did to you. I saw how it turned a man who once loved me into a machine that valued purity over a beating heart." She stepped forward, forcing him to meet her gaze. The warmth he remembered was gone, replaced by a crystalline hardness. "When they were born and I saw those marks on their necks, I wept. Not because I was proud, but because I knew. I knew that the moment the Han family found out, my babies would stop being children and start being assets. I wasn't going to let you turn them into soldiers before they could even ride a bike." Jisoo looked at the floor, the weight of his own cowardice pressing down on him. "Then why now? Why walk into the lion's den on the one day I was most visible?" "Because the lions found us first," Zara said, her voice dropping an octave, filled with a sudden, sharp fear. 3 weeks ago, a car followed us home. 2 weeks ago, someone broke into their preschool and asked for their records. I thought it was your father, but after seeing Minji Lee's face today, I realized the Lee family has been hunting my sons to ensure their own path to the throne was clear. You were about to marry a woman who was already planning to bury your children, Jisoo." She reached down and stroked Suk's hair, her touch a stark contrast to the cold violence of the world outside the door. "I didn't come back for your money, and I damn sure didn't come back for you. I came because you are the only man in this city with enough guns to keep them breathing. My sons are the worthy heirs your family wanted, right? Well, now you have to decide if you're a boss or a father. Because if you want to be their father, the life you've built has to die." Jisoo looked at the twins, his blood, his face, his curse. He looked at the crescent marks that had dictated his entire life, realizing that for the first time, the legacy wasn't a burden to be carried, but a life to be saved. He heard the heavy footsteps of his security detail outside the door, the world demanding he return to his role as the king of the underworld. "I'm not the man I was 3 years ago, Zara," he whispered. "I know," she replied, her eyes narrowing as she pulled the boys closer. "The man I loved would have never let me leave. Prove to me that the man you are now is worth their safety. Because the moment the smoke clears, if you haven't changed, I'm taking them back to the shadows, and you'll never see a Han birthmark again." The boardroom of the Han Syndicate sat atop a glass and steel monolith that overlooked the sprawling gray veins of Seoul. Inside, the air was chilled to a precise, uncomfortable degree, smelling of expensive oolong tea and the metallic tang of hidden weapons. Jisoo pushed open the double mahogany doors, his hand firm on the small of Zara's back. He wasn't leading her into a sanctuary. He was leading her into a firing squad. Kyung and Suk walked between them, their small sneakers squeaking against the polished obsidian floor. At the end of the long, oval table sat the 12 elders, the Council of Dragons, men whose average age was 70 and whose collective history was written in the blood of their rivals. At the head sat Jisoo's father, Elder Han, a man whose face was a map of cold, unyielding tradition. "You brought them here," Elder Han said, his voice a dry rasp that didn't carry a hint of grandfatherly warmth. He didn't look at the children. He looked at the ruined wedding invitation lying on the table before him. You halted a union that would have unified the East, disgraced the Lee family, and brought a commoner into our most sacred chamber. I brought my sons, Jisoo corrected, his voice echoing with a new, dangerous resonance. He leaned down, gently tilting Kyung's head to the side, then Suk's. The afternoon sun, cutting through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminated the wine-colored crescent marks on their necks. Look at them. The heavens have spoken where your genealogists failed. The mark hasn't appeared in 2 generations. Not on my cousins, not on my uncles. Only on them. A heavy, suffocating silence descended. One of the elders, a man with a scarred cheek and eyes like flint, leaned forward. A mark is a curiosity, Jisoo. It is not a decree. We demanded a pure legacy. A Han heir must be of the soil, of the history. These children represent a dilution of 1,000 years of ancestry. Zara stepped forward then, her presence a sudden, vibrant flare of heat in the cold room. She didn't wait for permission to speak. You talk about them like they're tainted wine, she said, her voice steady enough to make the elders shift in their seats. My sons carry the blood of kings from 2 continents. If your legacy is too fragile to survive the strength of my heritage, then your legacy isn't worth protecting. Silence, the scarred elder barked, slamming his fist onto the table. You are here by a thread of mercy that is rapidly fraying. Jisoo stepped in front of Zara, his shadow falling across the table, eclipsing his father's place. She is the mother of the Han heirs. You will speak to her with the respect her rank demands, or you will not speak at all. Elder Han stood slowly, his joints popping in the silence. You are choosing a fantasy over a kingdom, Jisoo. The Lee family has already mobilized. Their ships are refusing our cargo. Their men are whispering to our lieutenants. If you acknowledge these boys, you declare war on the Lee family. And you do it without the support of this council. Is that your final word? Jisoo asked, his eyes locking onto his father's. You would discard the only true blood heirs you have because they don't look the way you imagined they would. They are illegitimate, his father spat. They are ghosts. We will find a new successor. Your cousin's son is pure, loyal, and already being prepared. Give us the boys to be, raised elsewhere, and perhaps you can keep your life. The threat hung in the air like a poison mist. Jisoo felt a cold, sharp clarity settle over him. He reached down and picked up Kyung, while Zara pulled Suk close to her hip. I spent my whole life trying to be the son you wanted, Jisoo said, backing toward the door. I killed for you. I lied for you. I even broke my own heart for you. But I will not kill my son's future to save your pride. He paused at the threshold, his gaze sweeping over the men who had raised him. From this moment on, the Han Syndicate is divided. Those who follow the mark, follow me. Those who follow the past should start counting their days. As they stepped into the elevator, the doors closing on the outraged shouts of the elders, the building seemed to vibrate. Below them, in the shadows of the parking garage and the high-rise offices, phones were already buzzing. The boardroom war had begun. It wasn't just a disagreement anymore. It was a civil war. Half the men in the building would stay loyal to the old guard. The other half, the younger generation who valued strength over tradition, would look to the man who finally had something worth fighting for. Jisoo looked at Zara, her face pale, but her eyes burning with a fierce, protective light. It started, he whispered. I know, she replied, gripping his hand. Just make sure you're on the side that wins. For them. The safe house was a masterpiece of cold, architectural perfection, a concrete and glass fortress tucked into the jagged cliffs overlooking the Incheon coast. To Jisoo, it was the ultimate sanctuary, equipped with state-of-the-art surveillance and bulletproof glass that could withstand a thermal blast. To Zara and the boys, it was just another cage, albeit a gilded one. Inside the sprawling living area, the silence was deafening. Jisoo watched from the shadows of the hallway as Kyung and Suk sat stiffly on a charcoal gray velvet sofa that cost more than a mid-sized car. They looked tiny, their bright white shirts a stark contrast to the monochromatic gloom of his world. Seeking to bridge the chasm that 3 years of absence had carved, Jisoo signaled to his lead assistant. Within minutes, a stream of guards entered, their usual stern expressions replaced by awkwardness as they carried armloads of boxes. There were gold-plated tablets, custom-made miniature designer suits, and intricate, hand-painted models of the very helicopters that patrolled the perimeter. It was a display of wealth meant to dazzle, a king's ransom offered to two children who currently viewed him as a stranger. "I didn't know what you liked," Jisoo said, his voice hesitant as he stepped into the light. He gestured to a pile of high-end gadgets. "I had my staff procure the best of everything. If there is something else, anything else, you only have to name it." Kyung looked at a sleek, robotic toy that could navigate the room on its own, then looked up at Jisoo. His small face didn't hold excitement. It held a quiet, observant caution. He didn't reach for the toy. Instead, he reached for Suk's hand. Zara stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, her blue dress a defiant splash of color against the darkening sky. She watched the display with a weary, knowing expression. "They don't know what a designer suit is, Jisoo. And they don't need a tablet that can hack a satellite. I am trying to provide for them," Jisoo countered, a flicker of his old, commanding ego sparking. "I have the resources to give them a life of absolute luxury. They are Han heirs. They should have the world." Zara walked toward him, her footsteps silent on the thick rug. She stopped just inches away, her gaze level and unforgiving. "You think fatherhood is a transaction. You think you can pay back the 3 years of fevers I sat through alone, the first steps you missed, the nights they cried for a man they didn't have a name for. You're trying to buy their love because you're terrified you can't earn it." Jisoo flinched as if she had struck him. "I am trying to make amends." "Then listen to me," Zara said, her voice dropping to a fierce, low whisper so the boys wouldn't hear. "They don't want your gold. They don't care about your empire. They want to know they can sleep through the night without a man with a gun standing outside their door. They want to know that if they go to a park, they won't be snatched by a rival family looking for leverage." She gestured toward the window, where the red lights of a security drone blinked in the distance. "Right now, your name is a curse on them. Your wealth is just a target. If you want to be in their lives, stop trying to be a benefactor. Protection is the only currency I accept, Jisoo. Not the kind of protection that comes with a private army, but the kind where you dismantle the world that makes them unsafe in the first place." Jisoo looked at the piles of expensive toys, suddenly seeing them for what they were. Plastic and metal shrapnel from a life he was beginning to loathe. He looked back at his sons. Suk had fallen asleep against Kyung's shoulder, the boy's small hand still gripped tightly in his brother's. "I can't just walk away from the Syndicate, Zara," Jisoo said, though the conviction in his voice was waning. "If I leave, the power vacuum will get them killed faster than staying will." "Then change the Syndicate," Zara challenged. "Or burn it down. But don't think for 1 second that a pile of toys makes you a father. A father is a shield, not a bank." She turned away, gathering the boys to take them to the bedroom. Jisoo stood alone in the center of the room, surrounded by millions of dollars of gifts that couldn't buy him a single smile. He looked at his hands that had signed death warrants and built a kingdom of fear, and realized that to Zara, he was bankrupt. He had everything, yet he had nothing to offer the only people who mattered. The storm that had been brewing in the Seoul boardroom finally broke at 3 in the morning, not with thunder, but with the surgical precision of a cut power line. Inside the safe house, the soft hum of the air filtration system died, and the emergency red lights bathed the concrete walls in the color of a fresh wound. Jisoo was awake before the first glass sensor tripped. He had been sitting in a designer chair in the kitchen, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand, staring at the door to the room where Zara and the boys slept. He didn't reach for a radio to call his guards. He knew, with a gut-wrenching certainty, that if the perimeter had been breached this silently, his men were already gone. Minji's family, the Lees, didn't use street thugs. They used ghosts, black market mercenaries who specialized in cleaning family legacies. The first mercenary entered through the kitchen's service elevator, a shadow among shadows. He didn't see a boss waiting for him. He saw a man who had stripped off his suit jacket and tie, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, eyes burning with a feral, primal light. Jisoo didn't use a silencer. He didn't want a quiet execution. He wanted a warning. He lunged, his movement a blur of practiced violence. He caught the mercenary's wrist, the bone snapping with a sickening crunch that echoed in the small space, and disarmed him in a single fluid motion. He didn't stop there. This wasn't a tactical elimination. It was a desecration of his sanctuary. He drove his elbow into the man's throat, dropping him before he could even gasp. "Zara, get in the bathroom. Lock the door." Jisoo roared, his voice no longer the measured tone of a CEO. It was the howl of a wolf defending the den. More shadows flooded the hallway. The air filled with the smell of ozone and gunpowder as Jisoo took cover behind the kitchen island. He wasn't thinking about stock prices or the Council of Dragons. He was thinking about the birthmarks. He was thinking about the way Sook's hand had felt in his earlier that evening. A bullet grazed his shoulder, tearing through the fine Egyptian cotton of his shirt, but he barely felt the sting. He moved through the house with a terrifying, desperate efficiency. He was no longer the man who sat behind a mahogany desk ordering hits from a distance. He was a warrior in the trenches of his own home. He caught the next two mercenaries in the narrow corridor leading to the bedrooms, using the tight space to his advantage. He fought with a brutal, close-quarters ferocity, using his hands, his feet, and the edge of a marble console table to break through their tactical gear. He was a mess of blood and sweat when he reached the final door. His knuckles were split, and a crimson streak ran down his face from a cut on his forehead, but he stood as an immovable barrier between the hallway and his family. The last mercenary raised a rifle, the red laser dancing across Jisoo's chest, then moving toward the door handle behind him. Something inside Jisoo snapped. The boss died in that moment, and the father took over, a version of himself that was far more dangerous because he had everything to lose. He didn't dive for cover. He charged. He took the hit in the meat of his side, the force of the bullet spinning him, but he used the momentum to slam the mercenary into the reinforced glass window. They hit the pane with a thunderous crack, the unbreakable glass spiderwebbing under the impact. Jisoo gripped the man's tactical vest and drove his forehead into the bridge of his nose, over and over, until the shadows stopped moving. Silence returned to the safe house, heavy and suffocating. Jisoo leaned against the door, his breath coming in ragged, wet gasps. He looked down at his ruined clothes, his blood-soaked hands, and the carnage he had wrought. The door behind him creaked open. Zara stood there, holding a heavy brass lamp as a makeshift club, her body shielding the two wide-eyed boys behind her. She looked at the bodies on the floor, then at Jisoo. He expected her to look at him with horror. He expected her to see the monster she had always feared he was. But as he slid down the doorframe, unable to keep his legs under him, Zara dropped the lamp. She didn't look at the blood. She looked at the way he was still positioned, even in his collapse, to block anyone from getting past him. "You're hit," she whispered, rushing to his side. "They're safe," Jisoo managed to say, his head lolling back against the wood. I didn't let them in, Zara." Hyung and Sook peered out from behind their mother, seeing the man who had bought them toys now covered in the cost of their lives. For the first time, Hyung didn't shrink away. He stepped forward, his small hand reaching out to touch Jisoo's uninjured arm. Zara looked from her son to the man she had once called husband. The boss was gone, replaced by a bleeding, broken shield. "You stayed," she murmured, her voice trembling. "For the first time in your life, Jisoo, you actually stayed." The scent of antiseptic and iron hung heavy in the dimly lit medical wing of the safe house. Jisoo lay stripped to the waist, a thick bandage wrapped around his torso where the mercenary's bullet had carved a shallow path through his side. Every breath was a jagged reminder of his mortality, but his eyes were fixed on the doorway. Zara sat beside him, her hands stained with the remains of his blood as she wrung out a cool cloth. The silence between them was no longer a wall, but a fragile bridge, until the heavy thud of boots echoed in the corridor. The door didn't open, it was reclaimed. Elder Han stepped into the room, followed by two men whose faces were as expressionless as the stone statues in the family's ancestral garden. The elder looked at the blood-stained floor, then at Zara, his lip curling with a disdain that decades of etiquette couldn't hide. "You look like a common brawler, Jisoo," the elder said, his voice dropping like a stone into a well. "A king does not bleed in the dirt for a ghost. He sits on a throne and decides who lives and who dies." Jisoo tried to sit up, a hiss of pain escaping his teeth. Zara reached out to steady him, her touch firm and grounding. He didn't pull away. "I was protecting my legacy. Something you taught me was the highest calling of our blood. The boys are the legacy," the elder snapped, finally looking at Kyung and Suk, who were huddled in the corner of the room under the watchful eye of a loyal guard. "The woman is the distraction. She is the anchor dragging you into the depths of a war you cannot win. The Lee family has demanded a sacrifice for the insult at the altar. They want a head, Jisoo, and the council agrees." The room went cold. Zara's hand tightened on Jisoo's arm, her knuckles turning white. She knew this world. She knew that in the geometry of power, the shortest distance between 2 points was often a grave. "I've come to offer you a way back," Elder Han continued, stepping closer until he stood at the foot of the bed. "The council will recognize the twins. We will declare them the true, marked heirs of the Han Syndicate. We will bring them into the palace, provide them with the finest tutors, the strongest protection, and the path to the throne that is theirs by birth." He paused, his eyes flicking to Zara with a predatory stillness. "But only if the slate is wiped clean. A Han king cannot be tethered to a woman who has no place in our history. You will eliminate the distraction yourself. Prove that your loyalty to the bloodline is greater than your sentiment for a failed marriage. Do this, and you keep your empire. You keep your sons. Refuse, and you lose it all: the title, the protection, and the lives of everyone in this room. The Lee family and the council will not leave witnesses to a rebellion." The ultimatum hung in the air like a guillotine blade. It was the ultimate mafia logic. To save the blood, you must spill the blood. If Jisoo killed Zara, he became the undisputed king, his sons the undisputed princes, and the war with the Lees would end in a grim, shared understanding. If he refused, he was a dead man walking, and his children would be hunted as bastards of a fallen house. Jisoo looked at his father, the man who had taught him that love was a weakness to be exploited. Then he looked at Zara. She didn't plead. She didn't beg for her life. She looked at him with a tragic, piercing clarity, as if she were already mourning the man he was about to become. "You're asking me to choose between my soul and my crown," Jisoo whispered, his voice sounding like dry leaves on a grave. "I'm asking you to be a Han," his father replied. "The boys belong to us. She belongs to the past. Make the choice, Jisoo. The sun rises in 3 hours. If she is still breathing when it touches the windows, the order is given to raise this house to the ground." The elder turned and walked out, the door clicking shut with a finality that felt like a coffin lid. Jisoo slumped back against the pillows, the physical pain of his wound eclipsed by the agonizing pressure in his chest. He looked at Zara, then at his sons. Kyung was watching him, his small face etched with a terrifyingly adult comprehension. The boy had seen his father fight like a devil to save them. Now he was watching to see if his father was the devil they truly had to fear. "Jisoo," Zara said, her voice a soft, broken thread. "Don't," he rasped, closing his eyes. "Don't say a word. I need to think about how to kill a ghost without losing the children." The air in the deeper chambers of the Han estate was always cold, regardless of the season. It was a sterile chill, smelling of old paper, incense, and the metallic tang of dried blood. For years, Jisoo had believed this air was what power smelled like. Now, standing before the Council of Elders in the main ancestral hall, all he could smell was rot. Elder Kim sat at the head of the low, polished mahogany table, his face a roadmap of wrinkles etched by cruelty. Behind him hung the scroll of the Han lineage, a parchment stretching back 500 years. Jisoo's name was fresh ink at the bottom. Beside it, the empty space where a wife's name should be, and below it, the blank void waiting for heirs. "You have made a mess, Jisoo," Elder Kim rasped, his voice sounding like dry leaves dragging over concrete. The Lee family is demanding blood for the humiliation at the wedding. Our stocks are plummeting. And you are playing house with the foreigner and her brood. They are my sons, Jisoo said. His voice was quiet, lacking the deferential bow he usually offered these men. Hyung and Suk. They bear the mark. They are the only future this family has. They are half-breeds, another elder spat, slamming a withered hand on the table. They can be useful, yes. We will take them. We will educate them here, within the walls. We will scrub the foreign influence from them until they are proper Han leaders. But the woman? She is a distraction, a weakness. If you wish to keep your position, you will sever that tie permanently. Jisoo looked around the room. He saw the dark wood, the priceless vases, the grim portraits of ancestors who had all died alone, clutching their gold. He imagined Kyung and Suk in this room 10 years from now. He pictured their bright, curious eyes turning cold and dead, their laughter silenced by the weight of legacy. He saw them becoming him. The realization hit him with the force of a bullet. The Han Syndicate wasn't an empire, it was a cage. And he had almost locked his sons inside it. You're right, Jisoo said, unbuttoning his suit jacket. The movement was casual, but the tension in his shoulders was coiled steel. The boys are the future. That is why I cannot let you have them. Elder Kim narrowed his eyes. You dare dictate terms to us? We made you, and now I'm unmaking you. Jisoo reached into his jacket and pulled out a silver lighter. It was the one Zara had given him 5 years ago, before the divorce, before the darkness took him. He had kept it in his pocket every day since she left. He flicked the lid open. The distinct clink echoed in the silent hall. What are you doing? Elder Kim stood up, his composure cracking. Jisoo didn't answer. He kicked over the large ceramic jar of ceremonial alcohol standing near the altar, a potent, flammable offering meant for the dead. The liquid glugged out, soaking the priceless silk rugs and pooling around the legs of the mahogany table. The fumes rose instantly, sharp and stinging. You speak of purity, Jisoo said, his voice trembling not with fear, but with rage. You speak of legacy, but all I see is a slaughterhouse disguised as a temple. Jisoo, you are insane. The elders scrambled back, their robes rustling in panic. My sons will not learn how to kill in this room, Jisoo stated, staring at the flame dancing on the lighter. They will not learn that love is a weakness. They will be kings, yes, but they will not be monsters. He dropped the lighter. The flame caught the alcohol with a hungry whoosh, a wave of heat instantly blasting outward. The fire raced up the silk tapestries, devouring the history of the Han clan in seconds. The ancient scroll, the one that dictated who was worthy and who was not, curled into black ash. Chaos erupted. The most powerful men in the underworld were reduced to frightened children, scrambling toward the heavy oak doors. Jisoo didn't move. He watched the flames lick the ceiling, watching the throne he had killed for, the throne he had sacrificed Zara for, turn into nothing but smoke. He turned his back on the inferno. The heat pressed against his suit, searing his neck, but he felt colder than he had in years, a cleansing cold. He walked out of the main hall, past the screaming guards, and into the courtyard night. The sky was vast and starless, but in the distance, the city lights shimmered. Somewhere out there, in a small, safe house with mismatched furniture and the smell of shea butter and warm milk, his family was waiting. Jisoo loosened his tie and threw it onto the gravel. He took out his phone and dialed the only number that mattered. Zara, he said when she answered, his voice thick with the smoke of his past. It's done. I'm coming home. The smoke from the burning Han headquarters had finally washed out of his hair, but the phantom scent of ash still lingered in Jisoo's nose. It was a strange perfume for a new life, but perhaps fitting. He had incinerated a 100-year legacy to buy the silence of this singular Sunday afternoon. For the first time in his 34 years, Jisoo Han was not wearing a suit. The beige cashmere sweater felt foreign against his skin, too soft, offering no armor against the world. He felt naked without the weight of his sidearm and the heavy gold ring of the patriarch, which now lay melted somewhere in the rubble of his former office. You're scanning the perimeter again. Zara's voice cut through his focus. Jisoo blinked, forcing his eyes away from the tree line of the Han River Park. He looked down at her. She wasn't wearing the royal blue combat dress from the cathedral, nor the tactical gear she'd donned during the siege. She wore jeans and a white coat, looking terrifyingly normal. Old habits, Jisoo murmured, shoving his hands into his pockets to stop them from clenching. I keep expecting a blackened SUV, a sniper, a messenger. There are no messengers left, Jisoo, she said, her voice holding a mixture of steel and exhaustion. You fired them, or fired at them. The council is scattered, and the police are too busy picking through the ashes of your empire to look for a man who officially died in the blaze. A man who died, Jisoo repeated, testing the weight of the words. And who is this, then? He gestured to himself, a man standing on a gravel path, surrounded by falling autumn leaves and the sound of distant laughter. This? Zara looked him over, her dark eyes critical but no longer cold. This is just a guy trying out for a job. Entry-level position. No benefits yet. Jisoo almost smiled. It was a terrifying expression on a face that had forgotten how to make it. Before he could respond, a squeal erupted from the grass ahead. Appa! Look! The word hit him harder than a bullet. Appa! Hyung was sprinting toward him, his small legs pumping furiously, while Suk trailed behind, fascinated by a golden ginkgo leaf. Jisoo's body reacted before his mind did. He dropped to one crouch, his arms opening to catch the impact of the 4-year-old. Hyung collided with him, smelling of wind and baby shampoo. As the boy laughed, tilting his head back, the collar of his shirt slipped. There it was, the crescent-shaped birthmark on the side of his neck. For generations, that mark had been a death sentence, a burden that demanded blood and violence to protect. The elders would have killed to possess this child. Minji Lee would have killed to erase him. Now, under the dappled sunlight, it was just a patch of skin on a happy little boy. He runs fast, Jisoo said, his voice thick. He looked up at Zara, over his son's shoulder. Like you. He has your temper, though, Zara noted, stepping closer to wipe a smudge of dirt from Suk's cheek as the younger twin finally caught up. And your stubbornness. God help me. Jisoo picked Suk up, settling the boy on his hip. The weight was grounding. For 3 years, he had held the weight of Seoul's underworld, a burden that had hollowed him out until he was nothing but a shell in a tuxedo. This weight, the warmth of his son, the small hand gripping his sweater, filled the hollow places. I have nothing to give them, Zara, Jisoo admitted quietly, the insecurity that had plagued him since the wedding finally surfacing. The money is frozen. The properties are seized. I am not the king of Seoul anymore. I can't give them the world. Zara looked out at the river, where the water shimmered like crushed diamonds. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the rough knuckles of his free hand. It wasn't a hold, not yet, but it was an anchor. They didn't need the king of Seoul, Jisoo. Kings get overthrown. Kings get killed. Kings are too busy watching the throne to watch their children grow. She turned her gaze to him, fierce and unyielding. They needed a father. And frankly, so did I. I didn't need a boss to manage me. I needed a partner to stand with me. Suk yawned, resting his head on Jisoo's shoulder, trusting him completely. It was a trust Jisoo hadn't earned, a gift given freely by the innocence he had almost destroyed with his ambition. He looked at Zara, really looked at her, realizing that the legacy he had chased for 3 years, the approval of dead ancestors and bitter elders, was ash. The true legacy was standing right here, breathing, living, and waiting for him to step up. I can be that, Jisoo whispered, making the most important vow of his life. I can be just a man. Good, Zara said, a small, genuine smile finally breaking through. She turned back toward the path leading to the small apartment she had rented on the outskirts of the city. Then come on, just a man. It's your turn to cook dinner. And don't think you can order takeout. We're on a budget. Jisoo shifted Suk's weight, reached out his free hand to grasp Kyung's, and began to walk. He had lost an empire, burned down his throne, and stripped himself of his crown. But as he walked his family home under the amber glow of the setting sun, Jisoo Han knew he had never been richer.